I joined the university 3 years ago, and I was not in academia. I was in international research working in agriculture. So it's a chance, in fact, to land in academia at the end of a career. I think it's a blessing. I will go through slides. Some of them I will not explain because I was counting on 30 minutes presentation, not 20. So I was looking at the program, but as usual. Quite different presentation. I will talk about the Global South, but I will talk mostly about Africa. That's where I spent most of my career. And agriculture is, at the same time, life, but it's also a threat to the planet. The context of African agriculture, there are two large drivers of change in Africa. The demographic pressure, we are today 1.5 billion on the continent, will be probably 2.5 by 2050. And the change of that population going from rural population to urban population. So while there is an increase, there will be a large shift also, about 45% urban right now in Africa, and there will be 65 in 2050. So major changes and a lot of challenges related to that. The other one I don't need to talk about, everybody can witness it, and the climate change. And I think I remember, reading about climate change 20, 30 years ago, looking at those models, and you had the feeling that climate change was for the future, but not that we had time to deal with it. I think it's acceleration of it, and I think Morocco is really well placed for that. I think we are suffering of a major water crisis, but not only water. We have also increase of temperature, which is reducing the yields of cereals and the flowering of olive trees. So I think it's a complete shift. So I think the challenge is enormous. The other point is that 60% of the active population in Africa directly works in agriculture. Unlike Europe, unlike the United States, where it's 2-3% of the active population. You can see the graph there. It's maybe written very small, but I think South Africa is the one with the least active population in agriculture, and countries like Niger or Burkina Faso, you have more than 70-80% of the people living from agriculture. So food security is a concern for Africa, and I think there are still people hungry in Africa today. And you have food crisis also. Another effect of growing population in Africa on the continent is the demand, the increased demand for food. And so with that intensification of production system, food systems, it's clearing new land, clearing forests, clearing pasture, so very detrimental environmental effect. It's loss of natural habitat, biodiversity, land degradation, and we have also polluted cities. I think the planning of cities in Africa is not great. Low agricultural labor productivity is also a striking example. I think people say, well, there's no employment, it's better that people work in the field. I don't think so. Especially that most of the artwork is done by women and children. So human energy is not used very well, talking about human energy in Africa. So mechanization is something that is quite critical. Another striking thing about agriculture in Africa is the low value addition of agriculture, and probably following the coca crisis now, the price skyrocketed, produced in Ivory Coast. Most of the value addition of African products is somewhere else. So I think it's really important that we work on that. Poverty is remaining prevalent, and the poorly planned urbanization and feeding the cities becoming a challenge as well. Few graphs, I will go quickly through that, but that shows the fertilizer use in Africa, 20 kg per hectare per year, while in Brazil, it might be 400 kg per hectare per year. Europe and the United States, around 200, 250. And people say, well, the fertilizer are not good for the environment. But I think without fertilizer, you'll not be able to intensify agriculture in Africa. Maize yield. Who knows the maize yield in the United States? Iowa, for example. How many tons? It's more than 12 tons. That's the maize yield that we have in Africa. You can see that South Africa, more or less okay, but a country like Zimbabwe is producing less than 2 tons per hectare. That's way, way too low. So it might be a bit small, but the map that you see of sub-Saharan Africa is the yield gap you can see on that map. So the redder, the more potential you have to increase the yields by improve agronomy, improve management perspective, by market incentives as well, because in many places agriculture is still subsistence agriculture in Africa, so there's no real incentive to produce more. One thing also that is challenging if we want to give value addition of agri-food transformation in Africa is the variability of production from year to year. You cannot size a transformation, ag transformation industry if your production is varying so much. How do you size it? So, in fact, that yield gap is a bit like a thermometer when you are sick. It shows the, but it doesn't give you the solution on how to do things. And, talking about global South, global North, I think Africa is not a monolith. It's very diversified. And I'm a bit afraid global South is a term I don't use because it's 2 categories, North, South. And Australia is the global South? Probably not, no. You put Australia in the global North. But all those things needs are linked, and I think that's why the noosphere is a very, I think, interesting concept, and I will go through that when we are talking about the education offer we are trying to build in this university. You probably know that UM6P has been funded by OCP. So OCP is a state company, phosphate. We have the largest known reserves of phosphate, and phosphate is life. Right? It's everything in energy. If you look at the cell, ADP, ATP, phosphate is used in our cells. So we are in the land of plenty when it comes to reserves of phosphates, and we are sitting on the top of the continent where, in fact, all the soils, or most of the soils, are deficient in phosphate because they are old soils, they are wetter soils. So, and if you look at the available phosphorus level, we are way below 10 ppm available phosphate in the soil. So that's really the response. So I worked 17 years in Niger, and I worked on fertilizer and I worked on phosphate because it was critical to adapt to drought, because it developed the root faster. So when I had the opportunity to come here, I was not coming to sell phosphates, of course, but I realized that Africa was really missing something, phosphate. But once you solve that, you have plenty of other things that will be limiting. So it's probably the most limiting element when it comes to food security and agriculture in Africa. But if you solve that, the phosphate and the access to phosphate, you need to solve the seeds, you need to solve the agronomy, you need to solve the water access, life-saving irrigation, all those things. So I'm 9 minutes, I think. I'm just checking my time because, no, I just started the thing, 9 minutes. 9 minutes, I was checking my time. No, but I'll go fast and I'll go to the last slide. Who heard about Norman Borlaug? A few of you. That's the only scientist working in agriculture and agronomy who got the Nobel Prize. He got the Nobel Peace Prize. And he got it because he just worked on what is called now the Green Revolution. And the Green Revolution was great at the time, but unintended consequences that we are facing today in terms of pollution, land degradation, and so on. But it shows that, and it was a combination of 2 innovations, fertilizer and improved wheat variety. In fact, wheat, when you put nitrogen on wheat, the stem elongates to the point that it lodges. So what Norman Borlaug did, he did breed, cross a dwarf wheat with a good wheat, and he got a semi-dwarf wheat, to which he could just put nitrogen. And that saved millions of lives in South Asia and also in Mexico. Norman Borlaug was working for CIMMYT. I worked for 10 years for CIMMYT as well, but I never met him. Agri-food systems, I think it's food waste is something that's quite important as well. FAO estimates that 30% of the food produced is wasted. And it's wasted differently in the United States or Europe than it's wasted in Africa. It's the end of the food chain where we waste food in Europe and in the United States. We empty the fridge because we bought too much and preemption dates. In Africa, it's usually storage and pests. The environment also is an important issue, and I think the footprint of agriculture on the environment is tremendous. You probably heard about the pollution in Delhi. It's unbearable. And it's usually in the months of October, November. And of course, there are other sources of pollution, but a large source of pollution is, in fact, rice straw burning, because people need to plant the wheat quickly after. You all heard about the Amazon and how things are getting degraded. You can see also the picture of a field in Malawi where you have erosions. And soil conservation is key, because once you lose a soil, it takes thousands of years to recreate it. It's not reversible. I'll go quickly now, and maybe one thing about, we're in a university which like innovation. And usually people say technical innovation, scientific innovation. And I think innovations, you need to, in fact, technical innovations are important, but you need social, environmental, financial, and institutional innovation as well. So it's by grouping all those things that you make a positive difference. And innovation is not new. I mean, if you look at the history of agriculture, and that's why we are so numerous on Earth today, is because we had agriculture. So it's good, it's bad, I don't know. One thing that will probably make difference is all the genomic work that has been done, which can engineer crops that have traits that can adapt faster or better to changing environments. Urban farming is also something that we start talking about very much. I think we're interested in developing that. So I'll go over that. Rafael, I'm 12 minutes in my talk. Okay, then I'll just go. I was mentioning mechanization. I was mentioning human labor in agriculture. That's something we worked a lot when I was in CIMMYT, and I think a lot of promising things there. But it's not that simple, It's not a question of dropping two-wheel tractors in African landscapes. You need a full ecosystem in terms of maintaining the equipment, selling the equipment, having spare parts and things like that. So it takes a lot of efforts for that, but it's worth. Especially that you have a strong gender dimension on mechanization. If you had a slide on Bangladesh, because we worked a lot in Bangladesh on mechanization, give more time to women to rest, that's important, to take care of the children, and to have more quality time. So it's very important. I go over that. Keeping youth in landscapes in Africa is a challenge. I don't think many young Africans see agriculture as something very sexy and a future. I think we need to transform the image we have of African agriculture to a positive manner, but also be sure that what we try to develop is something that's the respect of income generation, poverty reduction, gender equity, and employment for youth. So you might say $6,700 is not very much. It's a lot in an African village. It's a lot of money. So that was the slide with the gender dimension on mechanization. The bottom slide is for Bangladesh. Just a reaper, harvester, two-wheel, small one. I will go quickly over urban agriculture. We're trying to start a program, on an initiative on urban agriculture, because I think it's better to start working on that today. I think it's pressing issues. A lot of things linked to urban agriculture is, circular economy, waste valorization, both biomass, solid waste, and liquid waste. Adaptation to climate change. A few months ago, there were people dying in some West African cities because temperature was too hot. It's the same now in many places in the world. So the cooling effect of vegetation is something that maybe can mitigate a bit the increase of temperature. I will not go through that. That's a framework, because I think sometimes people think agriculture, agronomy is a science. I mean, it's a series of science, both biophysical and human science. But that's a framework that we have been using for quite a long time to try to articulate what's needed in terms of research for development to improve African agriculture. The last slide, Rafael. Wonderful. Yeah. 15 minutes. I think we have to rethink how we teach young people. And I think this university has a clear mandate. It's not serving only Morocco, but serving Africa. When we look in the field of agriculture and environmental science, there's a big gap in terms of higher education. Not enough people are working in the field of agriculture. You imagine that 60 or 70% of the population depends on agriculture, but if you look at extension services in a country, it might be very small, not serving. So, and there are many reasons for that, but I think the structural adjustment plans of the 90s, forbid African countries to invest in agriculture, really. So, and I think that's World Bank is seeing that a bit differently today. So for us, I think the quality of education needs to mirror the research we do, so and the learning by doing that we do in this university. We want to build on a rich network of universities. We want our students to be able to see something else than just one campus. I think it's very important. We want to develop T-shaped skills, and that's where it reached the Noosphere, because you can see, the classical image of a scientist is somebody with a white coat, lab coat, and just in the lab. We want to have scientists having very strong disciplinary expertise, but being able to connect. So that's the horizontal shape of the T-shape. And that's very important, because you can see that multidisciplinarity, trends, and interdisciplinarity are key to solve the problems of the world today. So we want to give that to the students. So right now we have 170 PhD students, or 160. We have just got 60 new PhD students, and we started not to send them to the lab the first day, but to give them a pre-doc year, where all those skills will be taught. We are starting in September 2025, a new 5 years degree, where all those will be embedded as well. So I think and I think somebody showed the same SDGs. I think agriculture is very important for most of the SDGs. So I think it's, and for food security also. So thank you very much.